Hi, and welcome to the Changing Rhythms podcast. Thank you for joining us. We're your hosts. I'm Rebecca.
And I'm Bethany.
This podcast will explore life's changing rhythms. And to begin, we'll focus on career change. Each episode will have 4 segments. For segment 1, we'll recap the previous episode. 2, we'll go into the conversation of the day. And then 3rd, we'll answer your questions and respond to comments. And lastly, we will preview the next episode. So we hope you'll join us on this journey of our own changing rhythms as we reflect on the path so far and look ahead to new changes. And we are excited to join your journey. So we hope you'll take us with you and let us know how it's going along the way.
All right, so let's get started. So, Rebecca, tell us, who are you?
So my name is Rebecca. I'm a wellness coach, and on Instagram and Facebook and stuff, you can find me under my full name, Rebecca Danae Cortés. I'm based in Chicago. I'm 30 years old and married for 7.5 years to my husband, Tim. And we just had a baby girl named B who was born last summer. And who are you?
My name is Bethany. I'm a native Texan, but I grew up here in Chicago. I'm 44. I have a 19-year-old college sophomore. So I'm not completely an empty nester, but I'm much more of a much less frequently inhabited nester, if that's a thing.
Yes, absolutely. And it's your turn. I'm sorry.
Okay. So what's your current career?
So currently I work as a wellness coach and consultant, and I like it because I can use my best skills in a flexible job. I can adjust my schedule as needed to be present the way I want to be for my family, which is really important to me. I enjoy the dynamic challenges that come with creating workshops and other content for social media and just staying in touch with the community. And I love working with groups and individuals in support of living more abundantly. So that's my current work. What about you? What's your career?
So I am currently a high school special education teacher. I have been teaching for 20 years, and I have taught every age from 19 months to 19 years. I have taught a little bit of everything, but the bulk of my career was teaching French. I taught that for 11 years. Now I teach core subjects to special needs students. Yeah. So you have had more experience with the idea of change than I have. So tell me, why did you change careers?
Yeah, it's funny because I think, it does count as experience, but it's not like I set out to make my resume so varied. So it's funny to think of it that way. But my first job was an internship during the summer after high school with a prominent construction management firm. And I had various short-term jobs throughout my university years, and then considered doing mission work in Central America upon graduating. But instead, I ended up moving from Illinois to Michigan, where my fiance lived. And I found a job in retail there and later worked in childcare full time. We moved to Chicago a couple years after getting married, and I worked with my sister's bakery startup before returning to childcare. I then worked at a nonprofit organization with the goal of ending homelessness for a few years before returning to the bakery startup to help open a cafe. And finally, I started working as a coach, which is what I had in mind for several years before it really felt like the right time. So there are tons of changes in my career. Each of them kind of just fit the stage of life that I was in and the goals that were more important, overarching in my life at the time. So each time that I changed jobs or professional directions, I took time to seriously consider the impact of the change. Although sometimes the decision came suddenly after months of struggle, like when I realized that there was no way to progress in my role or the experience began to do less good than harm. So the reason for each change was unique to the situation, but I was always moving forward in the direction of new challenges and greater mental health, while sometimes also leaving behind what felt like a lack of growth and a lack of support from the people around me. And then I landed on coaching because it encompasses my favorite aspects of each position, volunteer or paid positions that I most enjoyed in my work experience. So I get to instruct others by simplifying ideas and creating systems that uplift people. I get to do research and create useful presentations that lead to lasting change for my clients. I can work alone or collaborate as I have the capacity to do so, rather than having to be with people all the time, which is really hard for me. I'm very introverted. Um, and I learn a lot as I do my work, which is my favorite part. I get to set an example and encourage others to make their life into what they want it to be. And that's something that you don't get in a lot of jobs. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity. So I know you're thinking about changing careers, Bethany. Why are you thinking about it? Why would you change?
So I think for me, the short answer is lack of passion. Teaching is one of those careers that you really have no idea what it's all about until you're actually doing it.
Hmm.
All of it consistently for years. It's not like, oh, I subbed. Okay, that's great. And that's hard in and of itself. But, generally when you're subbing, you're not doing the lesson plans, you're not doing the parent phone calls, you're not doing the meetings, like doing all of it for years is much. Um, and a lot of people feel like because they've been to school, they know what teaching entails,
Hmm.
and that's definitely not the case. To quote one of the first reality shows, you think you know, but you have no idea. To
Yeah.
me, in order to be an effective teacher, you have to have a passion for some aspect of what you're doing. Maybe you have a passion for learning. Maybe it's for kids. Maybe it's for developing an incredible curriculum. Maybe it's for collaborating with your colleagues. Whatever it is, you need to have some passion. And it's not necessarily the same for everyone, and it doesn't have to be. That's what makes it great. You can do or you can contribute what you have the most to give.
Hmm.
Um, and hopefully you have more than one area that you're passionate about. And the more you have, the more you have to give naturally. And to me, once you no longer have passion or not enough of it, I think one of three things will happen. You'll either quit flat out,
Hmm.
or you'll stay, but you'll be ineffective, possibly even detrimental to the students. Or three, you'll burn yourself out trying to produce a synthetic form of what you used to create naturally, um, and then burn out. And that's kind of where I am now.
Yeah.
Like I'm burnt out because I know what my students need and I want to give them that, but it takes so much effort and so much strain because it's not flowing naturally. And so it's not just there automatically. I have to kind of muster it up.
Hmm.
And to me, that's not sustainable in the long run. And I want to leave before I'm ineffective,
Yeah.
because that would be definitely a disservice to my students. And I think once you get burnout, then that leads you back to one or two. Either you're going to
Hmm.
quit or you're going to become ineffective. And so I'm leaning more towards the first one, always leave them wanting more. So I want to leave them, wanting more.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of my why. But I know there are things that have to be considered before doing this. And since you have had some experience, what were some things that you considered before moving forward with a career change?
Yeah. So I considered money every time, and that's kind of a natural first consideration when you're changing jobs. But it never ended up being the deciding factor, just because sometimes there are things more important than money. So I can think of a job where, well, actually, most jobs that I've left. Uh, Leaving, just by leaving them, would put us in a much less comfortable situation financially. And one of those times I left, even though my husband was looking for work, and we didn't know what the outcome would be. And that's where our faith came into play. Thankfully, God's always providing for us, but this was a moment where we really had to believe that and trust that, because the job was of a nature where it was doing less good than harm, like I mentioned earlier,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to get out. So money is probably the first thing I've considered for each career change, but then also the impact of leaving the job. So am I going to leave my coworkers in a lurch? And a lot of times the case is yes, I'm going to leave them, in a more difficult position because I'm not here anymore. And then I have to kind of weigh that against the other priorities. So whether it's my coworkers being impacted by my leaving, my finances being impacted by my leaving, just the nature of my day-to-day life, what's it going to be like without this job or with a different one in place of it. But always it comes back to my priorities. So the short list is that I prioritize my relationship with God. Can I, before God, say that this is the job that I should continue in? Am I honoring Him? Am I delighting in Him? How is it affecting my relationship with the Lord? And then, family and uh, responsibilities and such. And the list can go on and on. But thinking of it in terms of those priorities and in order of those priorities. And then I always consider the potential regrets because I don't want to make a decision that I know I'm likely to regret. But when it comes down to it, I think we're always more likely to regret staying in a position that is doing more harm than good
Mhm.
than we are to regret stepping out of it into the unknown, perhaps, and losing that money, that security. I think that regret is much more likely to happen uh, by not taking that step in most cases that I found myself in. So I just consider the long term. If I look back 10 years from now, will I regret staying here longer? Will I feel that I've wasted my time out of fear or some other some other motivator that's not really a good way to make a decision?
Right. Definitely.
Yeah. So what about you? What are you considering as you consider moving forward with a career change?
Well, I mean, there are definitely the practical aspects, like what do I want to do? Am I gifted in other areas? Are these areas that I can make consistent and reliable income anywhere near what I'm making now? When is a good time to make the transition? Should it be 6 months? Should it be a year? Should it be 2 years? I don't want to leave, like you're talking about leaving people in a lurch. I wouldn't want to leave in the middle of a school year unless I knew that that was what I should be doing. um, but when is a good time? What does this mean for insurance? What does this mean for retirement? Can I move? Is this something, whatever I move into next, is it something that gives me mobility? But as I was listening to you talk, I really thought about identity,
Mm,
because being a teacher was not just what I did for work, it was who I was. That's where I found my identity, which is not necessarily the best thing, but it is where I am, you know.
mhm.
And so I guess then my next consideration would be, so then if I'm not a teacher, then who am I? And I feel like that's probably going to be part of the process, of deciding how to move forward is, do I know who I am outside of teaching? Do I know what I
Right.
like to do? Do I know what I'm good at? Do I know what interests me outside of teaching? Because it's encompassed so much of my life for so long. I don't know that I know the answer to that right now. So I think that's probably going to be a much larger consideration than I even really thought about before.
Yeah. Yeah.
So So, we're going to wrap this up. So, we've started talking a little bit about change, what changes we've made, why do we want to make that change, or have we made that change? What are some things that we need to consider when making a career change? But we are at the beginning of the year, and that's generally when people make their New Year's resolution. I'm not a big resolution person. I think you should make a change whenever, whether it's January 1st or August 31st. I feel like anytime you see that there's room for improvement, then do something about it then.
Mhm.
Um, but since we are at the beginning of the year, um, what's one change that you'd like to make this year, Rebecca? Just one.
Yeah, thank you for making it simple, just one. I could list a whole bunch, but the main thing that comes to mind is the expectations that I place on myself, the responsibilities I place on myself. So I think I want to just come into alignment with reality that I'm only one person. And being a new mom teaches me that better than anything else so far in life. There's only so much I can do. And a lot of nights, it's like I put my baby down to sleep. And then I'm like, why am I ready to go to bed? And it's 7:30 at night because I've used a ton of energy just taking care of her, taking care of our home, doing a little work in between things on my business. And I think that adjusting my expectations of myself to align with reality will serve me so well. So everything that I'm doing, I'm just approaching it a little bit differently this year so far, considering what I've already done. A lot of times I think that's where my expectations get messed up. I think about how much more there is to do and I forget to acknowledge all that's already been done. So when I get to 7:30 and the baby's down and I'm looking at myself like, what do I do now? Recounting the whole day and expecting that I should be as tired as I feel right now, just as an example, but then
Mm-hmm.
applying that to my work, applying that to the things that I give myself to, the relationships in my life. The expectation should be that under the circumstances of the pandemic, it's going to be harder to keep up with friends. It's going to be harder to feel connected to people. And that expectation should trigger me to give myself some more grace, but also to reach out for connection when I need it. So that's the summary, just adjusting expectations of myself and the amount of responsibility I put on myself, making it more realistic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, but what about you, Bethany? What do you want to change? What's one thing you want to change this year?
I think along the same lines of what you were just talking about, expectations. Um, Not so much expectations of myself, but expectations of how things are supposed to be. I tend to have a plan or an idea of how things should work out. A should happen, then B should happen, then C should happen. And I think this year I want to be more open to not having to match my expectations for how I think things should work out or will work out. For example, ideally, in my mind, I would move from my current career to my forever career, right? I go straight from teaching to whatever it is I'm supposed to do next.
Mm-hmm.
However, I kind of had an epiphany a few weeks ago that that's not necessarily how things will work or even have to work, right? That's not necessarily the best way for things to go, and
Mm-hmm.
that's okay. Um, I can move into another job that is maybe a step toward my forever career, and maybe it's not. And then even the idea of a forever career, is that a thing? Does it have to be a thing? Does it have to be a thing for me? Just really trying to manage my expectations for how my life should unfold or the how what the next steps of my life should be. I think I need to be more flexible in that because I don't really know how they should look. And so it's it's almost self-defeating to have an ideal of what I don't know what it'll look like. If that
Yeah,
makes sense. So, yeah.
absolutely. That does make sense. And I'm excited to see what happens with both of us this year and beyond, as we work to adjust those expectations. Yeah. So, you listeners can answer this question to us as well. What's one change you want to make this year? And to answer it, you can email us at changingrhythmspodcast@gmail.com to answer today's question or leave your response in the YouTube comments of our video. And next time, our conversation will explore answers to the question, why make a change? So begin thinking about what's working for you in your current career and what changes you might want to make, and consider what keeps you from making those changes. We look forward to exploring more with you in the next episode, so keep listening and stay healthy and safe until then.